These are the headlines that we're following at this hour. The finance ministers of South Korea, the United States, and Japan, during a trilateral meeting, agreed to stabilize their foreign exchange markets amid the rapidly depreciating won and yen against the greenback. South Korea's health minister stresses that medical reform is a must to protect people's lives and health. He says by taking on board the rational opinions of related parties, the government will complete it no matter what. In Ukraine, a deadly Russian missile attack reportedly killed at least 18 people in the city of Chernihiv. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky pleads on allies for air defense support. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We begin with the trilateral finance talks between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan in Washington. The finance ministers of the three countries agreed to closely work together on stabilizing their foreign exchange markets. They shared concerns coming from the recent sharp decline of the Korean won and Japanese yen against the U.S. dollar. Our Shin Se-byuk leads us off.
The finance ministers of South Korea, the United States, and Japan have acknowledged serious concerns regarding the rapid decline in the value of the South Korean won and the Japanese yen against the dollar. Following their first trilateral meeting in Washington on Wednesday, South Korea's Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and Japan's Finance Minister Shinichi Suzuki issued a joint statement outlining their commitment to regular consultations on foreign exchange market trends and continued collaboration to promote sustainable economic growth and financial stability. The major concern raised by the three countries focused on the persistent devaluation of the won and yen against the U.S. dollar. The won is currently ranked as the fifth most undervalued currency among OECD countries. According to data released by the Bank for International Settlements on Wednesday, as of February 18th, South Korea's real effective exchange rate stood at 96.7 out of 100, using 2020 as the base year. The REER measures the relative purchasing power of a country's currency compared to other nations. A value above 100 indicates an overvaluation relative to the base year, while below 100 signifies undervaluation. Japan has the lowest index value among the OECD nations at 70.3. This assessment indicates that the strength of the U.S. dollar, coupled with the significant undervaluation of the Japanese currency, directly affects the won. Meanwhile, Bank of Korea Governor Lee Chang-yong acknowledged slight deviation in the won's exchange rate from market fundamentals, but reaffirmed that the authorities are equipped with the necessary tools to stabilize any volatile moves in the national currency. His comments indicating Korea's readiness to intervene in the market to support the won were made during an International Monetary Fund panel session on Wednesday. He is in the U.S. Capitol for the annual IMF and World Bank meetings, as well as meetings with G20 finance leaders and leading central bankers. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
President Yoon has asked Evan Greenberg, chairman of the U.S.-Korea Business Council under the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, to help encourage more American companies to invest in South Korea. During their meeting at the Yongsan presidential office on Thursday afternoon, President Yoon emphasized how big of a role the business sector plays in advancing the alliance and enhancing economic cooperation between Seoul and Washington. In response, Greenberg promised that the council would actively support mutual investment and collaboration between companies of both countries. The chairman is visiting Korea for the first time since assuming his position in January. And there has been a rather worrying outlook about Korea's debt-to-GDP ratio. The International Monetary Fund says this ratio may hit close to 60% by the year 2029. Lee Seung-jae covers the outlook for Korea and its neighbors.
The South Korean government's debt to gross domestic product ratio already exceeded 50% for the first time in 2021 and is expected to reach close to 60% by 2029. That's according to the International Monetary Fund's Fiscal Monitor report released on Wednesday, which included the debt to GDP ratio from 2015 to 2029 in 37 advanced countries, including South Korea, the United States, and Japan. The report says South Korea's debt to GDP ratio hit 55.2% in 2023, a 1.4 percentage point increase from the year before. IMF data also shows that the country's debt to GDP stood at 40.8% in 2015, but surged from 42.1% in 2019 to 48.7% in 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic. It reached 51.3% in 2021, exceeding the 50% mark for the first time. The UN agency also estimated that South Korea's debt will reach 56.6% this year and will continue to increase, hitting 59.4% in 2029. The IMF also said that global debt levels are at risk of increasing due to 2024 being an election year. Vitor Gaspar, the head of the International Monetary Fund's Fiscal Affairs, said that history and empirical evidence show that governments tend to spend more or tax less in an election year. 88 economies or economic areas representing more than half of the world's population have either held or are due to hold elections this year. The IMF forecasts the U.S. fiscal deficit to remain above 6% over the next 5 years, with Gaspar noting the U.S. has ample fiscal space due to measures they can impose on the spending and revenue side. However, like the U.S., Gaspar says China's fiscal deficit is projected to rise from more than 7% of GDP last year to around 8% by 2029. This could have consequences for the global economy, as China is a major lender to developing countries. The Fiscal Monitor report called for countries to make a renewed push towards improving their fiscal positions, especially due to the tight monetary policies in many central banks, which are expected to be loosened later this year. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
North Korea has removed the streetlights on the side of the roads that connect the south to the north. According to South Korean military sources on Thursday, the North was seen removing streetlights on the western Gyeonggi and eastern Donghae roads last month. Those are the same roads that the North planted landmines on back in January. A senior official at South Korea's Unification Ministry said the North will need to reimburse those lamps as they were part of the inter-Korean railway and road business funded by the South in the form of a loan. Pundits say the move shows Pyongyang's intention to stay disconnected from South Korea. The nation's health minister once again shows the government's will to complete its health care reform. Amid stalled progress seeking a breakthrough with the medical community, patient concerns are growing. Our Choi Soo-hyung has more.
The South Korean Health Minister Cho Kyu-hong on Thursday stated that the government will definitely complete healthcare reform. The government after the general election on April 10th is still showing an unwavering determination to reform healthcare. Part of those reforms is the plan to expand medical school admission slots by 2,000 from next year. The government insists 15,000 more doctors are needed by 2035 due to the rapidly aging population. South Korea currently has just 2.6 doctors per 1,000 people, far below the OECD average of 3.7. But the medical community says that with the continuous decline in birth rates, there may not be a shortage of doctors in the future, and says it worries about decline in education quality. After the plan was unveiled, trainee doctors in general hospitals resigned against the government in late February. Over 10,000 medical school students nationwide also opposed the plan by taking a leave of absence. And in late March, even medical school professors submitted their resignation letters to show their solidarity. Since then, it seems there is no breakthrough regarding medical reform. The doctors have demanded a complete withdrawal of the expansion plan, while the government urged dialogue and isn't backing down. Just before the April general election, President Yoon met the head of the Korean Intern Resident Association for a one-on-one meeting, but without any progress. Meanwhile, patients' discomfort is worsening. Many general teaching hospitals, from which a large number of junior doctors have left, are facing serious financial difficulties and are treating only emergency and severe patients. To fill the medical gap, the government has been running an emergency medical system to address healthcare shortages and deploying more military surgeons, public health doctors, and physician assistant nurses. Each university has to finalize its official admissions guide, including the number of new students by May, after approval from the Korean Council for University Education. Chernihiv, Arirang News.
After the general election last week, a modified grain bill that mandates the government buy surplus rice, which the president has earlier vetoed, was directly put to a plenary meeting today, led by the main opposition party. Our National Assembly correspondent Lee Si-hoo explains.
The National Assembly's opposition-controlled Agriculture Committee on Thursday directly referred to a plenary session a contentious bill requiring the government to respond to the steep rise in falling grain prices. 11 main opposition Democratic Party committee members and 1 independent voted in favor. They were all those present of the 19-member committee, as 7 ruling People Power Party members had walked out in protest. The revision to the Grain Management Act prompts the government to take active measures to stabilize prices of grain, mainly rice, to help farmers. Such measures include purchasing surplus grain or selling a government-managed inventory of grains. The bill was referred to the Legislation Committee for discussion back in February according to customary procedures. But parliamentary rules also state that a bill pending in the Legislation Committee for more than 60 days can be directly referred to a plenary session if over 3/5 of the original standing committee members agree. This is how the opposition-controlled Agriculture Committee was able to push through the referral of the bill, slightly modified after its original version was vetoed by the president last year. President Yoon rejected the bill in April of 2023, saying that the compulsory purchase of surplus rice using taxpayers' money is not in any way helpful for farmers. A year has passed since, and the PPP against the bill then and now says that a mandatory purchase will lead to even greater production of surplus grain in the long term. The PPP members of the Agriculture Committee released a statement after their walkout Thursday, prompting the DP to join them in coming up with what they call a reasonable alternative. They called the opposition's move a legislative flood in defiance of parliamentary law. The DP members of the committee, too, held a press conference and reiterated the need for a revision, saying that the fluctuating price of grains is threatening farming operations. They said their single-handed referral was necessary for the speedy passing of the bill, while not much time is left for the current assembly. The Agriculture Committee directly referred 4 additional bills to the plenary session on Thursday, including one establishing a legal basis for the founding of a Chamber of Agriculture and Fisheries for those in the sector to voice their opinions. It's expected the bills will be handled by the current 21st National Assembly during its final extraordinary session next month. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
In Ukraine, at least 18 people were reportedly killed in Russia's missile attack on the city of Chernihiv. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reiterated his calls for air defense support from the West. Our Song Yujin has the latest.
Ukrainian officials report that at least 18 people were killed on Wednesday local time in a Russian missile attack on Chernihiv, a city in northern Ukraine. This prompted President Volodymyr Zelensky to once again appeal for air defense support from Kyiv's allies. According to the emergency services, more than 60 people, including 3 children, were injured in the attack.
Everything blown out, windows blown out. See, all of it will be rebuilt. The worst thing is that the people died. nobody will return them.
I was worried the most about them making it to the shelter on time because there was information that there will be more incoming missiles. I was mostly worried about the child.
Officials said the strike damaged buildings, cars, and other infrastructure. Acting Mayor Alexander Lomacko said that a busy area of the city was hit by 3 explosions shortly after 9 a.m. local time. And on national television, he stated that unfortunately, Russia continues to engage in terrorist activity against civilians and civilian infrastructure, as confirmed by the strike on Chernihiv once again. Ukrainian President Zelensky reiterated his plea for support from Western countries, emphasizing the need for sufficient assistance from its partners. He stated on his social media that this would not have happened if Ukraine had received a sufficient number of air defense systems and if the world's determination to counter Russian terror had been sufficient. Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg announced that President Zelensky had requested a meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Council. The meeting will be held on Friday, first with President Zelensky and then with NATO defense ministers to discuss the urgent need for additional support to Ukraine, particularly air defense. Moscow did not provide an immediate comment on the attack and has denied deliberately targeting civilians since its invasion of Ukraine 2 years ago. 송유진, Arirang News.
South Korea pledged to provide a proportion of its $2.3 billion aid package within this year during a roundtable with finance chiefs to discuss support for Ukraine. At the meeting in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok announced that $200 million will be provided as humanitarian support. This is a part of the fund that President Yoon vowed to provide during a Group of 20 summit last September, with the remaining $2.1 billion to be given over a longer period of time. Choi also spoke of the government's plans to donate $50 million each to the World Bank and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development to provide further assistance for Ukraine. South Korea on Thursday celebrated the export of its 500th domestically built liquefied natural gas carrier. A naming ceremony for the vessel Orion Spirit, built by Samsung Heavy Industries, took place this morning at the company's Geoje shipyard in Gyeongsangnam-do Province. The carrier will be delivered to its owner, US-based banking giant JP Morgan Chase, on Friday. This milestone was achieved exactly 30 years after Korea constructed its first LNG carrier in 1994. Also on the local front, a declining population has brought many changes to the country, one of them being an increase in the number of homes that are vacant. Against this backdrop, abandoned homes are now going through a transformation. Our Lee Soo-jin has the story.
It's a small coffee shop within an alleyway in the central region of South Korea. A buzz of chatter travels through the air, even though it's a weekday, with most of it coming from this coffee shop. At first glance, it seems like your everyday coffee shop, but it was once an abandoned home. Originally built in the 1950s, the house had been left vacant for 13 years before the owner of the coffee shop decided to purchase and transform it into a space that people would find appealing. But he decided to renovate it in a way that would preserve its original form.
There are 2 types of architectural styles here. On this side, you can see elements of Japanese colonial architecture, and on the other side, modern Korean architecture.
South Korea has seen a surge in vacant homes from its declining population, with over 130,000 reported across the country as of 2022, nearly half of which are in rural areas. Because vacant homes tend to attract crime, there have been various efforts made by local governments to turn these into community assets. The local administration in Chungju, where this coffee shop is located, provides 10 million won, or around $7,000, in renovation grants for those who purchase vacant homes. The owner says these benefits and his own success story have encouraged others to purchase vacant homes, not just in this alleyway, but also in nearby areas.
The home vacancy rate stood at 50% 7 years ago. As of last year, it's at 10 to 12%.
Lee Jun-young is someone who bought a vacant home on a street 10 minutes away from the coffee shop.
Around 80 to 90% of my decision to purchase a vacant home was influenced by the success of the coffee shop.
He is now the owner of not just his own coffee shop, but also a guest house. Locals say that the atmosphere of the town has changed since these vacant homes were transformed.
Before, these streets felt run down, but now they have come alive again.
She added that she believes the town will continue to flourish as there are other vacant homes currently undergoing renovation. Business owners here say that an ability to see value in the old, as well as more monetary government support, are what will help not just this town but other areas across the nation with high home vacancy rates come alive again. 이수진, Arirang News, Chungju.
In other news, dessert market trends in South Korea changed swiftly due to the impact of social media and the so-called ditto consumption trend. Some desserts went viral and gained sudden popularity, but were then forgotten about, leading to small businesses having to close down. Our Park Gon-woo went out to find out more.
At South Korea's largest dedicated dessert market, more than 40 brands gather under one roof, selling a range of delightful treats. People began gathering in the mornings, sometimes even in long lines to choose their favorite desserts.
I spend about $14 to $21 a day on desserts, which is more than a meal. I usually get desserts that are pretty and popular on social media.
With Korean consumers heavily influenced by social media, content creators have been introducing new dessert items that could drive new trends domestically.
I think food content creators are a big part of what makes these snacks go viral. And after they go on social media, there's a domino effect.
And with news trends surging rapidly, some desserts suddenly gain popularity before the hype dies down and the trend almost disappears. One example is the Chinese sugar-coated fruit snack, tanguru, that went viral last year. According to data from South Korea's Interior Ministry, around 60 tanguru stores had already closed between the start of 2024 and early April. In the whole of last year, a total of 72 stores across the country shut down. A search online shows posts from frustrated tanguru store owners saying that they are selling up. That's compared to the situation in 2023, when the popularity of tanguru resulted in the number of new stores jumping by over 1,300%. One expert explained the reason dessert trends changed so quickly in South Korea.
Due to high stress levels, people have a huge desire for desserts, and many of those have a wide but short trending term. Korean consumers are highly affected by others, so as soon as one item goes viral, it withers quickly afterward.
He also said people hoping to start a new business should think of the longevity of their products in terms of popularity in order to keep their stores open. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News.
The air across the country has been stuffy due to the yellow dust for the last 3 days. With fine dust warnings expanding across the country, yellow dust will continue to affect various places until tomorrow. Many parts of the south will be affected by yellow dust tomorrow as well. In particular, the concentration of fine dust will be high throughout the day in parts of Gyeongsang-Mukdo Province and Gangwon-do Province, where yellow dust crisis warnings are issued. Tomorrow will be as clear and warm as today. In the southern parts of the country, daytime temperatures will rise higher and some places will feel the summer heat already. Tomorrow morning, Chuncheon and Gyeongju will start off at 9 degrees Celsius. Daily highs will move up to 25 degrees in Seoul, Chuncheon, and Daejeon. On the weekend, it is expected to rain across the country and cool down. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that is all for this newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 10 p.m. with the AI headline news. Take care.